Welcome everyone, and in this video I am going to share the simple skill my clients are using to gain the respect of their colleagues and turn their students into successful adults. And when I'm talking about students, I am specifically referencing children who have language disorders that are impacting their ability to communicate and succeed in school and life. Your job could actually depend on your ability to do this. And the reason why is because your supervisors are already probably saying you need to do it. And you're already most likely getting some pressure, not just from your boss and your colleagues, but the experts in the field of speech-language pathology are also telling you that you need to be doing it as well. What I am specifically talking about is this whole idea of co-teaching and pushing in and classroom-based therapy. So instead of that traditional pull-out model, actually getting out of our room and branching out and doing services and delivering them in the classroom. Before we go on, let me take a quick minute to introduce myself. I am Karen Dudek-Brannan, and I have been an SLP for over 15 years and have spent the last 10 years studying how to get students with language and literacy problems to their LRE, to their least restrictive environment. And I've also studied how we can actually make that happen, even though especially if we're in the schools, we have a crazy schedule and caseload. Now, let's get back to that subject at hand. Perhaps the most frustrating thing about this and the whole idea of co-teaching is that if you are an SLP working in the schools, is that no one ever has given us a roadmap for how we're actually supposed to get out of the therapy room and get into the classroom. And we're just given the advice, just use your professional judgment and figure it out. And the problem with that is that it doesn't actually tell us what we're supposed to do. And it's not helpful at all. The thing is that a lot of us were trained under the medical model. Yet when we get into the school, we're referred to as the speech teacher. But what ends up happening is that our role gets watered down. And when we do get into the classroom, because it's what we think we're supposed to do, we end up feeling like we're doing things that an untrained volunteer could be doing. And then, as a result, we start questioning our role. And we start to wonder, are we even therapists anymore? What are we even supposed to be doing? Because we're led to believe that the best way to provide services is in the classroom. And that actually raises an interesting question that a lot of us might be afraid to actually ask. And that is this really better? Is it really better to push in? Will it actually result in better student outcomes, or is it just something that's tied to someone's political agenda, or is it really about budget cuts and trying to cut back on services? Let's rewind to the early 1990s and talk about this a little bit more. So back in the 1990s, there was an article published, and the author took a very strong stance. And she said, quote, that lack of training is not a valid excuse for SLPs to not be doing classroom-based interventions. And that is often what is holding a lot of us back and why we're doing it. We think, okay, I'm not really sure what I'm doing, so it's probably better for me to just stick with what is in my wheelhouse and what I know that I can do confidently. Fast forward to 20 years later. There's also been other articles published about this, and specifically the one that I'm referencing was written by Marilyn Nippold that was published in 2010, and she said in her article that SLPs have the power to give students the underlying language skills they need in the workforce. So we absolutely should be getting into the classrooms more, because our skill sets are absolutely essential to give students what they need in order to be successful adults. Here's the thing about that. So when I have talked to a lot of different SLPs, a lot of them aren't really sure how to feel about this. So some feel empowered because on one hand, it's saying that we can add massive value to our students' lives and our coworkers, but some of us feel even more frustrated because the bottom line is that we're feeling like, okay, great, another thing I have to be doing that I am not even really sure how to do, and I'm not even really sure where to start, and I'm already overwhelmed. So that comes to the next question. Okay, so the experts are telling us that we should be doing this and we can add value, but when we actually think about service delivery models when it comes to treating language, how do we even know that push-in is better? Well, here's the thing that no one is telling you. We actually don't. There actually hasn't been a lot of research that supports one model or another. Specifically, this study by Kieran et al., they did a systematic review of articles and studies that specifically looked at delivery models, and what they found was that there's really not significant evidence that shows that one model is superior to another. And here's the other crazy thing is that they did a systematic study of tons of articles, and they only found 5 studies that met the criteria for their analysis. So not only have we not done enough research on this topic, a lot of the research that has been done has really lacked rigor, and it has lacked the appropriate methodology that we need in order to draw substantial conclusions about what we should be doing. But I want to highlight one of those studies from this systematic review that actually can help to give us some direction on what the heck we're supposed to be doing. And that is this study that was done by Thronberg et al. Back in 2000. And what they found was that they did find that the classroom-based delivery model with collaboration between the SLP and teachers resulted in more vocabulary growth than simply going into the classroom alone. So when it comes to treating disorders that impact language, it's not necessarily just about the service delivery model, because these authors, they studied a pull-out model, they studied a classroom-based model, and then they studied a classroom-based delivery model with collaboration between the disciplines. And the bottom line was that it wasn't simply about where services were happening. It's about what was actually happening when those services were being delivered. Because what the true indicator of success was the collaboration between the SLP and the teacher. Just simply being in the classroom is not enough. You need a solid roadmap so that you know exactly how to collaborate with the teachers, and you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing when you actually get in there. Let me ask you this. Have you ever wanted to do a co-teaching model, but you weren't even sure where to start? Maybe you were worried that things would get even worse, or you'd get in there and you'd have no idea what you were doing. Here's the thing about that. Of course, we should always be collaborating and working to be more aware of what's going on in the classroom. And in order to successfully co-teach, we absolutely do have to collaborate. That's been shown in the research. But that doesn't mean that co-teaching is always the right thing to do. So this is the first thing that we need to determine. And then once we determine that co-teaching is appropriate, we need to know how to actually do it correctly. So first, let's talk about how we would determine when we would actually do this. Because the thing is that in my practice, what I had started out doing was, of course, a pull-out model. And I focused on the elements of vocabulary, specifically things like morphology, semantics, syntax, to build that strong foundation. And what I found was I was actually able to get some students off my caseload or help them to make substantial gains and get them to their least restrictive environment with that alone, even just with a pull-out model. But then there were some students that just seemed like they needed some extra level of support because they weren't generalizing. So I found that when I built that foundation, that some students generalized and some didn't. So I found myself asking myself, what's the deal here? Well, the deal is that some students, you can actually get them to the point where they're generalizing with that structured pull-out model alone, with just simple work on vocabulary and syntax. So of course it makes sense to start there, but then you have those other students who perhaps they need you to tie it all together for them. They're having a hard time even having a normal conversation with someone. So they really need something extra beyond that direct work on just academic language, especially if you've got students who are just not able to tie all of that together. So for those students, we do need to take that next step and deliver therapy in more of a functional environment. But the problem is that for those students, once a lot of us make that determination, we don't actually do this the right way. So let's talk about what not to do. A lot of us just end up randomly going in and grabbing a book or grabbing something random off our shelves and doing a completely unstructured session, thinking, well, I'm just going to grab some type of curricular materials and I am just going to work on the language skills and correct them as they come up. Well, the problem with this, you actually need more structure than that, and so do your students. You need to make sure that you've got a game plan if you're taking your therapy to that next level and making it more functional, especially if you're going to be going into the classroom. You need to have some game plan to make sure that you're actually working on what your students need to address. But then here's the other thing. You actually need flexibility too at the same time, because if you keep your therapy too structured and too rigid, your students aren't going to generalize. So we need to find that happy medium, and that can be really challenging. And that's why a lot of us, when we want to go into the classroom, just feel totally lost and overwhelmed. But here's the good news. There actually is a skill that we can use to bridge this gap, that can give us that happy medium between flexible and structured. This skill is a huge predictor of academic success and is essential for developing the communication skills needed for the workforce. This is huge for kids who maybe they've made progress with some of those foundational skills, but they're still struggling to have basic conversations. The thing about this skill is that it can be a predictor. It can show us which students are going to struggle, and without it, not only are we going to struggle in school, but we're going to struggle in our lives after school. That skill, the ability to tell a story, or what we would refer to in the field of speech-language pathology as narrative language. This is really the glue that ties all those foundational language skills together and gives us the ability to communicate our messages clearly. The challenge that SLPs have had up until this point is that we haven't had a specific set of protocols to bridge the gap between structured and functional therapy to help us figure out how to get into the classroom. But that's going to change because I'm about to give you a chance to get one. So I want to ask you a question. Even if you've been struggling up to this point to get into the classroom, what if you had a roadmap for building strong narrative skills that would help your students generalize? Or a system that would work even if you couldn't always push in? The reason I ask is because I've actually put all this information into an easy-to-follow course designed just for SLPs. It's called The Art and Science of Narrative Language. The thing is that many SLPs still don't feel comfortable venturing out of the therapy room. And when they're in the therapy room, they're not really sure how to make their therapy more functional. But if you learn this information, then you will. When you join the Art and Science of Narrative Language, I am going to show you the research behind narrative language skills, so you'll be 100% confident you're delivering high-quality, evidence-based interventions that help your students generalize. So you don't have to worry that someone's going to question what you're doing, because you'll have the research to back up exactly what you're doing when you get into the classroom, or even when you're in your therapy room and you're bridging that gap to get your students to generalize by making your therapy more functional. I'm also going to show you how to evaluate narrative skills so you can easily communicate the value of your therapy with concrete data. And so you know if your students are actually making progress. I'm also going to show you tried and true techniques for building narrative skills so you have a roadmap for helping your students and you know exactly how to assist them and you know exactly what to share with teachers so that they can start to reinforce what you're doing in therapy. And the great thing about this is that it works whether you're pushing in or pulling out. So you can actually use this protocol in your therapy room and when you go into the classroom. I'm also going to give you a complete set of printable narrative language protocols and cheat sheets so you'll have exactly what you need to get started right away. All you need to come up with is the stories and books, which means you can easily adapt this and use it with whatever books are at your students' level or what they're reading in school, so you know that you're aligning with the curriculum. So this is for you if you have students in grades pre-K all the way through 12 who have a hard time generalizing what you teach them in therapy and bringing that over to the classroom. It's also for you if you have students who are starting to get the foundation, but they're having a hard time putting it all together, and you know that they need something a little bit more functional to just really tie it together for them. This is also for you if you know you should be getting out of the pull-out model, but you don't know where to start, and you want a system and a protocol to show you exactly what to do so you can start to do it with confidence so that when you go to approach teachers, you know exactly what to do, and you don't have to worry that you'll get in there and won't know what you're doing. This is also for you if you've ever felt lost when you decided to go into the classroom for therapy. So maybe you've already tried a pull-out model and you got in there and you just felt silly, or it just didn't go the way that you wanted to. Maybe it got watered down, maybe you got frustrated, or maybe there wasn't clear communication with the teacher. But this will give you a solid protocol. Now, this is not for you if you have students who are so severe that they're minimally verbal, or if they're using AAC devices. But this really is appropriate for any student in pre-K through 12 who is struggling with language skills, whether they are in an academic environment, where they're in the general education classroom for all of their core classes, all the way to life skills curriculums. And the great thing is that even if you have students who are getting resource services in high school, you actually need solid language skills and narrative skills for the workforce. So you can even adapt this to things that would be interesting for them. So you can really bridge that gap. Now, I could offer to share this information with you and coach you one-on-one, but that would take a full day's work for me to share all this information with you. And at my consulting rate of $300 per hour, that could cost over $2,000. So of course, I'm not going to charge you anywhere near that amount to get access to the Art and Science Narrative Language program. Normally, this package is available for $297 on my website. So that would get you access to all of the course training modules and all of the printable protocols. But for the next 48 hours, you can get access to it for just $197. You get a full $100 off. When you join the Art and Science of Narrative Language, because it is a self-led online course, you will get 3.5 hours worth of video training that you can watch whenever you want. And you can also rewatch them as many times as you need. You also get the printable narrative language protocols and cheat sheets that I mentioned that will give you everything that you need in order to implement the strategies. So with those narrative language protocols, you can print them as many times as you need to, so you can share them with your colleagues, so it makes communicating with teachers easy. It's worth 3.5 certification maintenance hours. And the best thing is that you have lifetime access, so you can log in and watch your video trainings at your convenience. I am so confident that you'll get the results that you want if you complete the entire course and use even just a couple of the techniques recommended, that I will offer you a 60-day money-back guarantee. So as long as you can show me that you made an honest effort to put in the work, I will give you your money back if you're not satisfied. So now you have a choice. You can continue to struggle and piece it together on your own and question whether or not you're doing the right things. Or you can take me up on this offer and get a solid roadmap so that you can go into any classroom or therapy session confident that you're giving your students exactly what they need to be successful adults. All you need to do to join is click Enroll Now below this video, and you'll be taken to a sign-up page where you can get signed up. And as soon as you do that, you'll get an email with your login credentials so you can get started right away. So if you want to take advantage of this time-sensitive offer and get $100 off your enrollment, then click the Enroll Now button to get started. So I hope to see you in the members area.